This is the first workbook in the Edible Knowledge Workbook series, Introduction to Food Science and Overview. Let's check out what's inside. So the first workbook has the first chapters on food science basics, what food science is. There's a science primer. In case your student doesn't have a large science background, this should be sufficient to get them through the books. There's a chapter on food processing, what that is, how it works, and my philosophy on that. And then a chapter on proximate analysis, which basically means what's food made of. And in all of these chapters, there's assignments and things that you do at the end, and I'll show some of those here in a minute. After those introductory chapters on what food science is and etc., you get into the science itself, to food science itself. So there's a chapter on water. There's a bunch of principles, food science principles presented, and then they're reinforced by experiments that you do in the kitchen at the end. And then there's a section at the end, and I'll show those in a minute, called What Do You Think? And then there's a chapter on carbohydrates, a chapter on protein, and a chapter on fats. And then at the end, there's a bonus chapter if people are interested in what the educational requirements are to become a food scientist, the kinds of classes you'll take, and that type of thing. And then there's also a glossary. So let's take a look. So this is what it looks like inside. I have these text boxes throughout that help to define terms that aren't defined in the text in the rest of the book, just to kind of call it out. And then occasionally I'll have these video boxes, and these are where, to help further understanding of a particular concept, I went to the internet and found videos that help to describe and to further the understanding of what's going on there, and then you can actually see it. Some of these videos I've made myself, not very many of them yet, but I'm working on increasing that number. Okay, so these are some of the assignments that I have in there. Here's the science primer. Okay, at the end of each chapter, there's this What Do You Think section that I mentioned, and there's questions that are asked that you're meant to answer in essay form, and that's the same as the chapter review questions. And then there's also a journaling idea, and some people do journaling, and it's kind of hard sometimes to come up with a good journaling idea. So those were actually hard to come up with good creative ideas on what to on something that you could journal or write about. The questions I'll say in here are not the typical questions you might see in a textbook, where you go back into the chapter and you can regurgitate what the highlighted text is and you're done. It's they're deeper thinking questions. They make you think past what you've read and what you've learned and then apply it. And so there's kind of really no wrong answer to those, but they really make you think. And I'm excited about that. One of the things that I found with homeschool curricula that was out there is it seemed like it was a mile wide and just an inch deep. So it covered a lot of stuff, but it really didn't go into much depth. My books are very different. I am the author of everything that my company offers right now, so I think they're awesome, but I am a little biased, I'll just have to say. My books are different in that they're much narrower in focus. This is food science, and then I have one on physics and engineering, and but they go quite deep into the concept, and that's partly why the age recommendations are 10 and up, with the sweet spot being junior high into high school, with the exception of the For Kids book, which I'll talk about here in just a sec. So, okay. So here we go. These are some of the other chapters that don't have experiments at the end, but they have assignments that you do. Okay, here we're into water. So here we talk about some of the characteristics of water from a food science standpoint. It's bipolar. Water activity is a crucial concept that many of you won't have heard of, but you'll recognize it because you see it every day. The density of water and ice, the formation of ice, implications of water and food, and again, more videos that you can go out and find. And then you get into the experiments, and I call them experiments. Let's make a mess. So sorry, yes, you're going to make a little bit of a mess sometimes in the kitchen, sometimes more than others. It kind of comes with it, with the territory. So sorry about that, but not really. It's fun. At the beginning of each experiment, there's a section that tells you exactly what you're going to need, all the way down to you're going to need a permanent marker or a pen, for example. And then you get into the experiment. And the way these are organized is you go through and do the experiment. There's some things where you fill it out. There's writing boxes where if you choose to write in the book itself, you can write in there. And then after that, there's a discussion that talks about what you saw and what was actually going on there. So some of the experiments, most of them reinforce what was discussed earlier in the chapters. Some of the experiments actually introduced new concepts that were better introduced through an experiment. But that's how each is organized. The experiment, there's the second one, you do it, and then there's a discussion explaining what happened or what you might not have seen if things didn't go quite right. So that's the way each one is organized. Here's carbohydrates, proteins, enzymes, talk about enzymes here, animal proteins, experiments. Here we talked about beef, so you get to learn about different ways of preparing beef, the same piece, and how they come out very differently from one another. Fats. And here's the bonus section. It talks about educational requirements, just very short for those who might be interested. Food science is a great career. If you think about it, people tend to stop eating last when there's trouble in the world. And if you go into a grocery store, everything you see has food scientists behind it in one form or fashion. There's a lot of food scientists out there, but it's not a lot of people know about it as a career, and it's a good career. References, and here's the glossary, and the glossaries will be comprehensive as you go through the books. So there you have it. That's the first workbook. This is where you want to start. Give it a try.